Hello and welcome to episode 191 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we actually have some official RosterMania news. Not much, but something, and a big one at that. And we have a lot of other reports and rumors that a lot of things have actually changed since the last time we did this podcast, which we fully expected it to. And I think even the day after we did our show, things started to change, which is par for the course for the Ego Chall Podcast. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Doing all right. Like you said, it has been the busiest RosterMania period since we last went live. When we last went live, we had a pretty good amount of info, rumors, reports, however you want to phrase it, on basically every team. Now we're kind of at the point where we're like waiting for like some of this stuff to officially happen. And I think once that happens, then some of these other teams where we haven't heard much from yet, they'll get the ball rolling on their offseason plans, and then we'll have even more to talk about. But yeah, Preston kind of alluded to it. There is one official big domino that has gone through and been confirmed. That's the big one we'll be talking about today. And yeah, other than that, just got some basic stuff to go over since last time we went live, and should be good to go.
Yeah, that big one that you were mentioning happened yesterday afternoon, evening, Friday, August 22nd. Atlanta FaZe officially announced the departure of aBeZy. We had been talking about it for a few weeks now that he was reportedly going to sign with the Los Angeles Thieves, or he was going to leave regardless, wherever that may have taken him, and that he wasn't going to be part of FaZe's roster, which they announced with a Twitter video. If you want to go and look, it's kind of like a 2-minute. It's like what LA did with Octane a little bit, where they have him talk about his time with FaZe, and they overlap some of the clips, and obviously them winning champs and everything like that. So, it's a pretty weird thing to think about, because Atlanta FaZe has literally not existed without aBeZy on the roster to this point. And the same could be said for Celium, who's reportedly leaving as well, and Simp, who is reportedly staying. So there's a lot of moving parts about this, but now that it is official that aBeZy is departing Atlanta FaZe, how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that we have talked about. I mean, in recent years, we've kind of like just said like maybe it's getting to that point where FaZe is going to have to consider making roster moves. But before it ever got to any point like that, the big thing around this, really, in my eyes, was always aBeZy and Simp's entire careers have been
Yeah.
intertwined. And the one thing that I always like remembered or like to point out when we were having these legendary aBeZy versus Simp, not even really debates, but just conversations, um, was that aBeZy was in one more grand finals than Simp because he was on that United squad at the start of Black Ops 4 that made it to the finals of Vegas when they lost to
Optic.
Optic. So he made it to one more grand finals than Simp before Simp became 18 and was actively able to uh, compete at the pro level. But other than that, they've over the last 6 years, I believe it is, they've played every tournament together, and all their accolades and everything like that, aside from one grand finals appearance, are together. And it's always been a conversation of like, when it's all said and done, it feels like it's going to be Simp 1, aBeZy 2. Obviously, that narrative's changed a little bit over the last couple of years, but um, I think that's the biggest part about the Tiny Terrors and splitting and aBeZy leaving FaZe is now we're actually going to get like, assuming this isn't a 1 year situation for aBeZy and then he retires, which I don't see being the case, we should have substantive amount of data over the next couple of years to actually have a debate about Simp and aBeZy playing together versus them playing against one another. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going to save any part of that actual debate for once the rosters are actually confirmed. But based on the rumors, I personally feel like aBeZy would be in a much better position to see immediate success than Simp's rumored FaZe roster. I mean, naturally, if aBeZy does go to LA Thieves and is playing alongside Scrap and Hydra, I just think that's
Yeah.
pretty much a nasty trio right there. And I'm not gonna go on a limb and say it's comparable to the FaZe trio because they obviously haven't done anything yet and it's not even confirmed. But that's immediately that's just a very scary trio of players, and the sub duo of Hydra and aBeZy is, you know, that's could go down in history as one of the best ever. Like we talk about Kismet and Hydra and how much Kismet enabled Hydra to just pop off. I feel like, Kismet's playstyle is comparable in that sense to aBeZy and is just willing to be that guy who goes in first, do the dirty work, stuff like that. And if aBeZy is able to do that alongside Hydra, like that could even elevate Hydra to another level, which is just a super scary thought for the rest of the league. So overall, yeah, it's really, especially for FaZe fans, it's really cool. And an esport that doesn't see a lot of players play together for 5+ years. It was a really good run, and it's something that we'll always be able to look back on and talk about whenever we do our historic episodes and stuff like that. But as of yesterday, we are officially entering a new era in aBeZy's career, Simp's career as well, Atlanta FaZe's legacy as an organization in the CDL, and there are going to be some awesome narratives that we're going to have to keep a look on. And I mean, regardless of what the teams look like, that first showdown between Simp and aBeZy, that's going to be awesome to see.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who would be longer tenured teammates than Celium and Simp and aBeZy. Like you said, more than 5 years because they got together like the end of 2019 before the first CDL season. Well, I mean that three obviously. aBeZy and Simp have been together since 2019, or probably more than 6 years now. I can't think of any players off the top of my head that would have that kind of longevity. Even like the Cole Dynasty was obviously a very short term thing. Even TP and Aches weren't together that long. The Optic Dynasty, like maybe Formal and Scump had like the longest tenure together, but even then, I don't think that it would have been 5 or 6 years. But I mean, it's pretty incredible. It's kind of a testament to their success though, because it's not realistic to keep players together that long, especially 3 players out of a 4-player team together for 5 years without having some kind of high level success. And for 4 seasons, they were the top team in the regular season. They won champs one year. They've been to multiple grand finals, won a bunch of tournaments in that time. So it is kind of like the end of an era for not only Atlanta FaZe and their respective careers, but for the CDL in general. We're seeing kind of the dissolution of the FaZe trio this offseason, which is pretty incredible. But I did, like you, I'm very interested to see how this all works out because, the saying is the grass is greener, or the grass is always greener or whatever, and or the grass isn't always greener, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't for these types of moves. But I agree with you that the grass actually might be a little bit greener or just as green for aBeZy to go to LAT, because he goes from playing with Simp to playing with Hydra, which is kind of like, take a pick, and that's a good option to have. Simp, on the other hand, like we're going to see if it is more just the chemistry fit, if he can, because I don't believe that 04 is, maybe 04 is better than aBeZy currently. We have absolutely no idea. That's kind of the deal here. With Vancouver being so good this year, it's kind of hard to decipher how good 04 was individually and how good he could make FaZe, especially with Simp. But the playstyle stuff is probably the most interesting because for 90% of aBeZy's career, he has had a reliable force next to him, like somebody that he's played with nearly his entire career in Simp. And now it doesn't really matter if Hydra is better or just as good, but he's definitely different than Simp. And that could play a factor, especially early in the season. See if that actually matters too much, if LA's, or, maybe, I don't want to say it's positively LA, but it is looking like that to be the case. But yeah, that would be pretty interesting. And on your first point that you made about the rankings, I've always thought that that Simp was better than aBeZy, but like if you're ranking them, I would always put Simp like one spot ahead of aBeZy. Like you can never really separate the two very much, other than that. And that's obviously not a shot at aBeZy, because I believe he's like one of the top 10 best Call of Duty players of all time. And if Simp simply did not exist, aBeZy would have at least one MVP to his name, and probably a few event MVPs along the way. So we're really going to be able to see what the value and the all-time kind of historic nature of these players are over the next few seasons. And it probably is too soon to kind of say one way or the other how things are going to work out. But yeah, LA probably they look a lot better on paper, I would say, in terms of kind of elevating aBeZy's legacy and potentially getting him a third champs ring before his former teammate Simp, which is pretty mind-boggling to even say out loud. So we'll see what happens with aBeZy and what happens with Simp. It's just very weird that it is kind of coming to an end. Like, we have literally never had a podcast episode where they were not teammates until this one. So that just seems like a very odd thing to think about. But that's the nature of like not finishing back-to-back seasons the way you wanted to, having just very erratic performances at the end of the year. And now we're seeing kind of the result of all of that happen. I think the next biggest thing, though, that we need to talk about this week is Space Station. I don't know if we've ever really mentioned them on this podcast, maybe like once or twice. They've been mostly in other esports, and Halo specifically is where I would probably most recognize them, but they're obviously in other esports as well. And they are reportedly targeting a Call of Duty League spot. The specifics of it seem to be a little hazy. It seems to be very much up in the air. But what has been reported is that Space Station is very, very interested in getting involved in the CDL. And they've actually started to contact teams about acquiring a spot or doing something like what LAG did this past season, where the Gentlemates were kind of like affiliated with the Gorillas until they actually took over the spot. The plan, according to Ronnie Intel of Breaking Point, is that Space Station would like to move the team to Salt Lake City, where Space Station is located. I don't know exactly how this is all going to go. We were talking before we went live that the CDL is actually in a pretty good spot in terms of organizations. Actually, like if you think about where we were maybe even 3 years ago or 3 years ago, we had like half the teams that were essentially replaceable because they didn't feel like putting in the work. They didn't seem like they were really dedicated to the actual CDL. Now I would say we're down to two organizations that feel like they could be replaced at any given moment, and that's the Boston Breach and the Carolina Royal Ravens. Both teams seem to have very shaky financial footing, which is always kind of a red flag when you're talking about the CDL, and it's usually led to the sale or some kind of change within the league. Boston specifically has, I don't know what their deal is, but we talked about this last year, how like right before challengers and champs and everything at the end of the season, all of their funding kind of seemingly got pulled, but they're still around more than a year later. They just finished third at champs. Like this was essentially their best season in the CDL, and yet it potentially could be the last. And then Carolina has been all over the map. They were originally the London Royal Ravens, now the Carolina Royal Ravens, and I have absolutely no idea what to expect of them. They don't seem like, even competitively, that they're going to be in any shape or form a real contender this year, and they certainly weren't this year when they finished, I believe, sixth place, and then got absolutely trounced at champs. So what do you think about all of this? Space Station coming in, who could they come in for? Just give me your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, so I was just trying to look it up and I wasn't able to find it. So I don't know if it's actually was Space Station, but I thought they were involved in that like group of organization that there were a couple reports around two off seasons ago when it was like Liquid, Gen G, and Fnatic. I thought Space Station was also um, a part of that, but maybe I'm misremembering. Um, if they were, then this is potentially just another step in them showing that they are interested in having a CDL team. And even if they weren't a part of that initial reports from previous years, then this is showing that another organization is entering the ring to have interest in getting a Call of Duty team together. And um, it's not quite the same. Again, like you said, I think at least for me, I think they have an Apex team or did have an Apex team. But outside of that, Halo is what I would associate Space Station with. Um, it's not to the same level as like C9 coming in last year, in my opinion. But at the same time, C9 came in last year, and we had all these talks about what they could potentially do with rosters, and they did. They acquired the New York spot with the New York roster that had won champs in 2023, and then that roster basically dissolves, and Cloud9 doesn't have a very successful 2024 season, or 2025 season. So, um, yeah, and end of the day, like you said, it really it feels like if Space Station is coming in, it would be potentially for Carolina to take Carolina's spot, which that's unconfirmed. It just feels like that's like um the only quote unquote opening or potential opening there. And I do think, you said something before we started recording too, like, it's very different situations in terms of like, it feels like the two orgs that could potentially be replaced being Carolina and Boston. Boston is in a situation that feels very different from Carolina, where it's like Boston is still feels like they're still trying to make something work with whatever situation, whatever hand's been dealt to them. And everything we've seemingly heard this offseason is that they're still planning to stick around. We don't know for sure. Carolina, though, it feels like, they had a potential franchise player in Gwen. He walks. They're now in a situation where they tried to put a roster together for EWC, and that wasn't able to make it. They weren't able to make that happen. So it feels like there is an opening here for Carolina to exit if, that is potentially what they want to do. I also said to you before we started recording that Zuma, on one of his recent streams that I was watching, he made it sound like this potentially, if Space Station is interested, the timeline in terms of legal issues and legally getting a purchase to go through from a business perspective and legal perspective might not be enough time for it to happen before next season. Um, there were, I feel like that whole situation ironically, when Boston joined, like that was like kind of a different situation because there was potential that there were only going to be 11 teams in the CDL that season. And I feel like that happened a little later, but that was also, not a situation where like we weren't going to have 12 teams. Obviously, that could be the case if Carolina decides to
Yeah.
not field the roster, but we're not there yet. All things considered, I think it's great. Space Station wants to join if they are interested in joining and fielding a competitive roster. That's pretty cool. I just think the other interesting nugget here is the Salt Lake City aspect of it. It's not necessarily like a city that would immediately jump out to me, and I think that's kind of like interesting in the sense of it could we've had the debates on geolocation and all that for a while, but like Salt Lake City it could bring some new fans, and I, don't know a lot about Utah, but a Salt Lake City COD event, like maybe that gets me out there. I don't really know. But to tie it in just real quick too, there was something I put in the notes last episode that we didn't actually discuss, and I know you and all of our heated discussions on the
Yeah.
geolocation aspect of the CDL. Taylor Miller, at Taylor J Miller on Twitter, is a Dexerto reporter. He reported back on July 29th that he was told Call of Duty League teams voted to keep franchise locations in their names for the upcoming season, and that kind of tied in with the reports on Toronto Ultra potentially rebranding to Toronto Koi. He used Minnesota G2 and LA Gentlemates as other examples alongside that. And Jacob Hale quote retweeted it and said this could give teams freedom to represent orgs rather than franchises, and that like could be something where like Space Station, again in my eyes at least, could be wrong based on their perception in other esports and stuff, but like Space Station could in theory enter the CDL as the Salt Lake City Space Station, and that's like kind of connected to their organization. It wouldn't be a case where they have to come in and do like, I don't know, the Salt Lake City Astronauts or something
Yeah.
completely unrelated to their actual org name. So I think that's just something, again, not confirmed, just a report, but that could be like something interconnected here if Space Station does end up entering the CDL.
Yeah, I'll make it brief, just for the people that might be tuning in for the first time or just haven't heard this specific rant before. Um, Geolocation is like not that bad of an idea in general. When you enforce it, it is possibly the stupidest fucking thing that you could possibly do, because it doesn't actually matter. Like, the reason that I like the Cleveland Browns is because I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. So they were one of the closest teams, and my dad was a Cleveland Browns fan because he also grew up in Ohio. So like there are things that, and I live in Youngstown now. It's like halfway between Pittsburgh, halfway between Cleveland. You don't see many Bengals fans. Why is that? Because they're not close. They're not that close to Youngstown. So you see Pittsburgh fans because it's an hour away east, and you see Cleveland Browns fans because Cleveland is an hour west. That's all it is. But if you have no connection to the local community, then what is the point? What is the point of there being an LA Gentlemates? They are more connected to Paris, France, than to Los Angeles, California. I get why Optic would want Texas. They're right downtown Dallas. I get that completely, but so is half of the CDL. Almost half of the league is based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So that also just doesn't make sense in general. Certainly there are teams that are based in their cities that they're actually tied to. Toronto, they play out of Toronto. Atlanta has played out of Atlanta. Miami plays out of Miami, so on and so forth. But that's not the case for a lot of these teams, and it's just actually ridiculous that we continue this facade. I have no idea why the majority of the teams would vote in favor of keeping the franchise locations, because half of them don't do anything with it. Yeah. And like they're not tapping into the local markets. I could see if you're like, yeah, we're not located there, but we're still trying to get into the market of LA. We're still trying to get in the market of Vancouver, so on and so forth. But to me, it just like Minnesota G2, like what the hell is that? Who cares about that? Like Minnesota was actually one of the few orgs for the majority of the CDL that was like really in on making it a Minnesota and really like a broadly Midwestern experience, because they, after the Huntsmen moved out of Chicago and became Optic down in Texas and all that stuff, they were the only Midwest team, and they remain the only Midwest team. And yet they really haven't done anything since then, because G2 is not tied in any way to Minnesota. The reason that they bought the Rocker is because it was one of 12 CDL teams. That's all it was. If they were based in Timbuktu, they would have also bought them, because that is their best way to get into a very exclusive esports league. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I would hope at some point we just kind of get rid of it all. And if they want to be based in those locations, then certainly by any means do that. I think it puts your team at a disadvantage, as we saw with Cloud9 this past season, where they were forced to be in LA despite representing New York. I don't know if people are too familiar with the map of the United States, but New York is on one side of the country and LA is on the complete opposite side of the country. So those don't really fit. But even in game, it was not beneficial whatsoever for Cloud9 to be based in LA, because the internet stuff, because most of this league is played online, that actually played a role, I think, and you think as well, in how they performed, especially in the online matches, which are 60-70% of the matches that we see in a given season. So it's all kind of stupid. I hope we get rid of it, but I understand some organizations' point of view why they might want to keep it. Space Station is interesting, and so I was looking it up while you were talking, because you were talking about how Fnatic and so on and so forth. So that was actually last summer, right around this exact time, actually, August of 2024. And it was when the Falcons stuff was starting to get confirmed that they were coming into the league. They were going to buy the Vegas Legion spot and take over the Vegas CDL slot. And it was Ghost of Hope, who does a lot of leaking around Call of Duty and sometimes the CDL. He kind of got this wrong. Well, he certainly got this wrong, at least in the short term. And it was, he said, Fnatic and Gen.G are returning to the Call of Duty competitive scene with Black Ops 6 to replace the Carolina Royal Ravens and the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And he said sources also indicate that the Boston Breach will be running it back despite poor results and unstable financial backing. So there are some things that he got right in that, and that was that the Guerrillas did get replaced in Black Ops 6, and that the Boston Breach would be running it back. However, Fnatic did not come in, Gen.G did not come in, the Carolina Royal Ravens did not go out. Instead, it was obviously Gentlemakes coming in. They took LAG, despite it was almost like a partnership this past season. I think this coming season we will get just the LA Gentlemates and call it a day on the Guerrillas name, I would imagine. I have no idea if that's confirmed or not, but that just seems the most logical.
I thought I saw somewhere that they might be around the time of that report with the geolocation stuff. I thought I saw something that they might try to go Paris Gentlemates, but I couldn't find that in the notes.
Yeah, I thought I saw that as well, but I'm completely fine with that. They're a French organization. Yeah. They have the most popular French player of all time as their owner. That makes sense. But what the rotation actually quote tweeted that original tweet by Ghost of Hope, and he said, Team Liquid and Spacestation Gaming are other names that are floating about right now. Falcons is a done deal, announcement soon. The others are not 100% locked just yet. And I actually don't, I'm not doubting that Ghost of Hope or the rotation had these sources and that they were reliable. I just think there's a lot of movement and a lot of fluidity with all of this stuff, because there's so much volatility in esports, and even more specifically in Call of Duty esports. So, and there's only 12 teams, so it's not like you have a ton of options. And of those 12 teams, there's a large chunk that they're just not going to sell their spot. They're just all in on supporting COD esports, and God bless them. They are the absolute best, that they're still riding it out, and they're in it for the long term. So there are only probably a few spots that they could even buy. To name Fnatic, Gen.G, Team Liquid, and Space Station, I just don't see there being a quarter of the league ready to sell at a given moment, especially when Falcons came in, and I'm sure they could just swing around any kind of money that they wanted to and outbid all those other organizations. So maybe there was a potential spot for one of those, Liquid, Fnatic, etc., if the Legion had sold to them instead of the Falcons, but obviously that wasn't the case. And Falcons are now a big time player in the CDL, because they're, probably spending millions of dollars to bring in Celium this year, and just spending millions of dollars on their roster in general. So, it's interesting. Space Station obviously being involved in Halo means, to me at least, that they are not looking more as a profit thing. they're just kind of interested in these legacy esports and like how
Good
they
point.
they can be part of it. I think when you get involved in like League of Legends, there could be a little bit of pushback of like, are you looking to turn a profit or are you looking to support esports? Because those two things do not coincide very often for a lot of the organizations. So if they've been involved in Halo a while, I think they've had a really good team, if I'm not mistaken, for a long time. That bodes well, in my opinion, for how they might handle a CDL team. They might not be the best, obviously, because there's just only so much talent to go around, and we're seeing it with some of these lower tier teams. Like Boston probably isn't going to be competitive. Carolina is probably not going to be competitive. Minnesota is probably not going to be competitive, and that's not because they're doing anything wrong, but at a certain point, like you get boxed out by Vegas, you get boxed out by LAT, you get boxed out by maybe Gentlemaids, get boxed out by Optic and FaZe and Miami and Toronto. Like there's just only so much you can do. So I would like to see it. I don't know what this will end up being. I don't know what the timeline, like you said, Zuma was talking about, like that probably does play a factor because we'll get to it, but the new game comes out in 2.5 months, and that would probably mean that the season starts in 3.5, 4.5, somewhere around that, unless the deal happens right now and then they're able to kind of transition things really quickly. I'm not entirely sure how those things work. I was kind of surprised that Gorillas, like any form of Gorillas, lasted like to begin this season, and that's what happened. So I don't know if there's a timeline that CDL kind of requires things to go on. Like if you don't hit like September 1st, then you kind of have to do this like mush thing with LA Gorillas mate, or you're just not in it at all until the following season. I'm not sure how it all works, but I'm interested. I'm very much fine. I do not need Carolina in this league anymore. I love Boston, but I don't know if they're long for this world. I think I hope that the people that are really like involved in the CDL on Boston's part stick around, because I think they could be really useful for another team if the financial backing isn't there, obviously. But yeah, I'm cool with Carolina getting replaced regardless.
Just last thing on that space station note that you kind of mentioned in terms of like being competitive or whatnot. Legend, the current
Oh yeah,
Optic Halo player, he played for Space Station from December 2023 to December 2024, so the year before he just joined Optic this past year. So there is a connection there with Space Station. That would be interesting, and that's something that I wouldn't new team coming in, kind of like you said, the just the question whenever a new team comes in. We had this conversation when Boston first formed, like they were at a disadvantage because they were coming in, all the 11 other teams were already formed, so they had to pick from the remaining players that just weren't on a team. This would be an interesting opportunity if Space Station enters, gives an opportunity to someone they have a previous relationship with, and potentially somebody to look to make that transition from Halo to COD. Feels like that would be an interesting match. But there have been other reports around Legend and whatnot that we'll get to eventually, so don't know how likely that is, and we don't even know at the end of the day if Space Station will be in the CDL or not for next season. But definitely is interesting that this is 2 years in a row now that we've heard that the org is at least interested, which, end of the day, uh, it's good to hear in terms of, the future of the league. There's still people who want to be involved.
yeah. Let's talk about Black Ops 7 real quick, because like I don't think we need to go too far deep into this, because a lot of this stuff is kind of, these reports and rumors. There has been some confirmed stuff, but we'll know more probably over the next month. But Black Ops 7 will officially release on November 14th. That was announced this past week, I believe. The early access beta was confirmed for October 2nd. And there's a rumor that early access beta will last like 2 or 3 days, and then October 5th will be the open beta, and that will last like I think the rest of the week. That's the rumor. I didn't see any confirmation on that specific part of it, but that also means that in less than a month and a half we'll get some kind of. I mean, you're going to see teams kind of scrimming or trying to scrim each other. They'll try to I forget what the actual term is, but like when they all queue at the exact same time and they try to scrim each other, that's happened a lot in the previous betas. So we might actually get to see some teams and how they might look in Black Ops 7. Obviously, it doesn't really mean anything because there will be quite a time before the full release and when we actually get to see some official matches. But I thought that was interesting. Confirmed maps that are coming back, former Black Ops maps, or Black Ops 2, 3, 4, whatever. Hijacked, Express, and Raid will all be in Black Ops 7. Obviously, Raid and Express have been competitive maps since Black Ops 2. I mean, they're classics. Hijacked is a pub map, which is like one of the most fun pub maps of all time, in my opinion, but it doesn't have anything to do with competitive. And
Early
well,
on competitive in Black Ops 2, back in the PDW meta.
yeah, before like MLG Dallas 2013, it was part of the meta. S&D was like the underground for S&D was just a complete shit show, and there's a reason it wasn't a competitive map for a while.
I just remember there's VODs of like Haggy using a shotgun and riot shield in the underground hardpoint there on Hijack. It's like he's just sitting in front of the one entrance with a riot shield. It's like, yeah, have fun.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I got my Remington gold in Black Ops 2. I just sit in
Yeah.
that little upstairs bedroom and riot shield, shotgun. That's all you really needed. The biggest stuff I think is like I know the wall bounce and all that stuff is important, but there was a report that tac sprint will not be a part of Black Ops 7, and I think that is by far the biggest change just on a game to game level. And then, of course, there's also a report that control will be replaced in the CDL with uplink. I think so. Like the wall bounce then comes into effect, and that might make
Yeah.
it very important. But what do you think about those specific changes with tac sprint potentially going out, uplink potentially coming in, and the wall bounce playing a factor in uplink coming in?
Yeah, so the tax sprint thing, I think I saw something that it's like it's going to be off by default, and there's like there's going to be something in the settings for it or whatnot. So I don't know exactly what the deal is there. Um, Realistically, if it isn't a part of the next game, that is going to be a pretty significant difference in terms of the movement and whatnot. Could have an impact on like slide canceling.
Yeah,
Maybe no tax sprint means it's harder to snake. Could also mean that removing it enters some sort of other movement interaction
yeah,
that is similar to snaking but isn't the same, but is just as exploitable and as controversial. Um, so we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out there. The uplink thing is definitely interesting. Uh, Kind of like you said with the wall bounce being teased or whatnot. That's kind of what I mentioned when we were talking about this a while ago. Is there would need to be some way if uplink was to ever be boots on the ground. Like I talked about it. You said the name. I don't even remember it. It's like that
gridiron.
basketball. No. The basketball league where like you can jump on the trampolines to dunk or
Oh,
whatever it
slam
was.
ball. Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
that'd be fun.
that's kind of like how it would have to work in a boots on the ground game, in my opinion. Um, Not totally related, but one other element of uplink that's always been cool. Like you're able to hit some pretty wild throws in previous uplink games where like the ball bounces in, and that's not even attributed to like it would just be like you're throwing it over three buildings and it hits it. You got the line up and it hits a pretty miraculous bounce off the ground. What if there's some way to use these wall bouncing pads or whatever to hit some wild throws or trick shots, whatever? That would be kind of cool to see if that's implemented. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see on all of that. Going back to the maps, like you mentioned though, and tying it in with uplink here, we had this conversation a couple years ago when some of these um, previous maps where it would have been MW3 when the MW2 OG maps were coming in,
Yeah,
and we were talking about like NW2 2009, Hardpoint didn't even exist. How are these maps going to function in Hardpoint? We would have to have these same conversations with a map like Raid. Like, obviously, Raid being in the game is immediately going to be involved in all of the competitive game modes. If uplink is a mode, how does uplink work on Raid? I imagine, like, the goals would just be one over like the top of the garage spawn and over the top of like that back jungle area by the basketball court. But I don't know how it would work or if there would be any issues or whatnot. But that's just something to keep in mind there if this all does come to fruition. Same with Express. I mean, Express really only got to, I think Express was in control for maybe a little bit, but it was really for S&D back in Cold War. I liked Express CTF when CTF was actually a thing. And I do think like that layout, like that might bode well for uplink, just like the back area where those trains are, like that's kind of open and you could put the uplink goal in the air there. So again, don't know how it'll all work and stuff, but I did see some comments around like, oh, here we go again, Raid's back, blah blah blah. Got to keep recycling the maps, and I just think over the last couple years, like there has been some, especially this past season in particular, just the original maps that are coming in these new titles they're just not the best, and we saw it with this past title. Hacienda was added like 2 weeks into the CDL season, and it was immediately like the most competitive map in all three game modes, essentially. And I think there's a strong, again, we don't even know what some of the new maps are going to look like in Black Ops 7, but like just based on the pedigree of Raid, you can make the argument that Raid might be one of the best competitive maps in Black Ops 7 if, there aren't any major changes made to the map or whatever for the new game. So I think it's kind of like a situation where for some people it might get boring to have these maps recycled and reused, but at the same time, if they are going to be solid for a competitive standpoint, like you have to take what you can get, and it's not like we got like Arklov Peak or Piccadilly or some of these other maps that were used in the CDL and were great. Like we're getting a map that we know can work and function as not only a good competitive map but a great competitive map, and I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, they serve as a baseline essentially, or like the basement for the maps, because we know that they can work in some context. We'll see, I guess, because if there isn't attack sprint, then obviously the maps don't play nearly the same as they did even in Cold War when attack sprint was a part of it, which could throw off timing and stuff, which I just think that brings a whole different aspect of this, of the competitive scene. If it slows down even just a little bit and there's no attack sprint, that's kind of been my biggest gripe, is like the faster the games go, there can be some kind of skill gap that is involved in that. Like Fortnite, for example. Fortnite building has gotten so fast that there is a massive skill gap that can grow in that in the speed that people build. However, it also creates all the randomness that comes with that and can actually lower the skill gap. I think with Call of Duty, the slower games had, I think, a wider skill gap, just because you couldn't just rely on the random nature of just running past or sprinting everywhere. And, obviously slide canceling wasn't a thing back then. There were some kind of movement glitches and things that you could do to get an advantage, but it was just far less emphasized. And I would like to see it go back a little bit to where it is slower, it is more focused on, are you making the right play, or are you just making a play at super speed and it kind of catches teams off guard, which is, that's fine for sometimes, but that's not how you want an esport to actually play the majority of the times. As far as uplink goes, I'm not sure how to feel about the wall bounce thing. I really don't like wall running or wall bouncing in general. Like it is what it is in the jetpack games. Like that's just kind of like what you expect. I would rather just have it be like the slam ball thing where there are just kind of like trampolines or something. Like obviously it's not a trampoline because it'll be futuristic, but like essentially what a trampoline is, where you could like maybe there's one or two trampolines or maybe even three in front of the point, and that's a way to you run on them, it bounces you up and you can dunk it. I also think that you could make it kind of like a risk by if you missed it, you missed the point, for example, and then you jump on the thing and then you miss it, you fall to your death. Like the fall damage is so much that you die immediately, which would then cause you to be more strategic about when you're doing it or how you're doing it. I think that's an option. I don't see them doing that, but I just think that my ideas are generally very good, so they should follow them. The maps, like it is what it is. Like we just need good maps in general, and that's the point. That like the game can be just absolute shit, but if the maps are actually good, then like it's probably going to be a good game. And I think that's the biggest point, is we need more good maps. If Raid and Express are a part of that, then that's fine. Those are two maps that we can rely on, but we need hopefully half a dozen more that are just decent enough where they can be in whatever game mode, whether it be uplink or control. Obviously, hardpoint and S&D being a part of that. But we'll see what happens with this, I guess. We'll get to know more, I guess, when we get to the beta.
Well, final thing for me, at least on Black Ops 7, is there's the rumblings or rumors potentially of some of the guns returning, and one is the M8, which obviously, pretty sure you've said it in the past, is one of your favorite guns. I know for me, I love a good burst gun. The big thing with me, and I believe we talked about this, which would have been probably Christmas time or the holiday season last year when we were doing our wish list episode,
Yeah.
is just I would hate for the M8 to be in Black Ops 7 and then be immediately GA'd. And I fear that is very likely to happen if the M8 comes out and is just even slightly above average. So my hope is that the M8 is a part of Black Ops 7 and it is just not ridiculously OP. It's not like an auto one burst, which again, that a lot has changed since the M8 was last in competitive play. Not even in terms of the games, but in terms of these players' skill levels. Like, it's very possible that we've just entered an era where these guys shoot so straight that a burst gun is just too OP in a pro's hands. I hope that's not the case, and I hope there is a way for the M8 to be a part of Black Ops 7 and not be OP or even just like above average to the point where the pros insta GA it. But that's something I will be keeping an eye on once we get to like this beta and stuff. Hopefully, the M8 is a part of the game, and I'm gonna have fun using it in whatever sense I'm able to use it when I'm playing. But I would love nothing more than to see the M8 actually be used in competitive again because I love burst guns.
Yeah, I think it will get GA'd almost certainly. The what the devs should do is the only way, like the only possible way to one burst a fully healthy person is if all of those bullets hit his head. Like that should be the only way that it's actually a one burst. Anything else, it should be at least a one, like 1.5, like, or two bursts. Like there's just no other way to do it without just pissing everyone off. But even then, it could just be ridiculously OP because, like you said, players are just so much better, like just in terms of gun skill, now than they were 12 years ago when the M8 was like really like the most dominant AR. There was an M8 or something in Black Ops 4, right? I feel like there was a burst gun.
Yeah, the M8 was in Black Ops 4.
Yeah, and that was good. I don't remember if that got GA'd at some point or if that just got nerfed into the ground or
Actually, I'm thinking of Black Ops 3.
Oh, it was Black Ops 3. Yeah, it was.
There's the XM4 too in Black Ops 3. Maybe Black Ops 4 was when they added marksman rifles and there was a burst. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I feel like the M8 was a part of. I'm trying to think in my head because obviously Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4, I played a lot of zombies.
Oh, well, the M8
Um,
definitely was in Black Ops 3 now that you
yeah, no, I
mentioned
know
it.
that.
Yeah. I felt like there was a burst
M8
gun in Black
4?
Ops 4, but maybe I am just forgetting.
The M8 A1 is Black Ops 2. Where can I
Um,
see?
what was it? Either way, like
I'm just
that's
gonna do Black Ops 4 guns.
the but
Weapons
like we're
list.
probably heading toward a GA. If it's good, it gets GA'd. If it's bad, it just won't be touched, and nobody's gonna play with it. So like it's really there's a fine line. Like they have to be absolutely perfect with tuning it right away, or it's completely over.
Yeah, so Black Ops 4 had tactical rifles, and there was the Swordfish, which I think is the one that kind of looked like an M8, was a 4-round burst gun.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that.
but I think all the tactical rifles were GA'd because, like, thinking about it now, like, Black Ops 4 was ICR and Maddox for AR, and the SOG for SMGs, so we didn't see it in competitive,
Yeah,
regardless.
I think I might have just been thinking about it in pubs or like
Yeah.
very early in the competitive scene.
Oh, Tremmy's in chat. It wasn't it, but it was called. It was. Yeah, Tremmy said swordfish too. So there you go.
Yeah. So we'll see. I don't I don't think either one of us have faith that they'll be able to tune it precisely, and it will probably just get GA'd
Yeah.
in general. Other thing, the last thing on Black Ops 7 is the report that there will be no manual doors, and Trimmer just probably absolutely fainted when he heard the news. I mean, he was like one of the foremost haters on this topic back when they were introduced, and I would imagine he's stuck to his guns on that. I mean, they're awful. Like they have made no sense. There's a reason that Call of Duty existed for decades, really, without manual doors. But I think it was what MW19. That was the one
Yeah.
that was like, yeah, we definitely need these doors. And ever since then, they have just completely been poisoning our sweet beloved Call of Duty. If they are gone, then Treyarch is actually kind of cooking. Even if they get absolutely reverted like right afterward, but I just think this is the best case scenario for competitive.
It might have been the doors. I don't know. I've been talking to Trem here and there in DMs, and I just remember bringing up something that we were talking about and comparing it to like when they brought back map voting for pubs, which was in this last game.
Yeah.
That wasn't what I was talking to Tremor about, but that's obviously one example of what I'm about to say. The other one was when they decided to remove red dots from the mini map, and then they're like, "Oh, we're bringing back red dots to the mini map," and it's like you're bringing back something that never should have gotten rid of in the first place and celebrating it as a W. So that's basically what we're gonna be seeing here. If doors aren't a part of this game, it's gonna be like no more doors, and everyone's gonna be like, "Yay, no more doors!" It's like, well, we should just not had doors to begin with, and then we wouldn't have to be celebrating this. Um, but yeah, I do have some fond memories of Hackney Yard gameplays where Tremmy's able to hear people breaking through doors halfway across the map, and it's just like, yeah, cool. Like, why is this here? But that's for another day. Yeah, I think that's where I stand on the door situation. Hopefully, it's another instance here where we're celebrating the removal of something that just didn't need to be a part of the game in the first place.
And then they'll do it again, and they'll bring it back, and then they'll get rid of it, and they'll just keep doing that for like the next 3 decades as they rake in billions of dollars every year selling the newest Call of Duty. Last thing before we kind of speed run through the RosterMania stuff, the Esports World Cup Foundation has announced the launch of the Esports Nations Cup, which is, as you would imagine, like the World Cup. It's in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in November 2026. These are national teams, not organizations. So Team USA, England, Saudi Arabia, Poland, etc. You see how I worked in Poland because
I did.
Binkowski. I mean, this has been like a topic of discussion for years.
Yeah.
Like literally anytime like there's no news in competitive Call of Duty, it's like Breaking Point or like formerly like Esports Nation probably would have brought this up. But they would say like who would be on Team USA for COD or in a World Cup, or who would be on Team Canada, so on and so forth. And I think it's always interesting. I mean, it would be incredibly difficult to put together an American team because there are a lot of great players. Same with Canada. Obviously, Canada has some really, really great players and could be a contender against Team USA in a World Cup like this.
Dashieli, Gunless Karma. Ooh.
Yeah. Well,
not a lot of
I don't think
there.
it's going to happen now, but yeah, that used to be the team. What do you think about all of this? Like this, again, this has been talked about like for probably a decade now. Like basically since esports has blown up, everybody's been talking about like, well, we need a World Cup. We need to put nations against nations. And I think there have been other events in the past. I don't want to say that this is the first like inaugural national team event, but Call of Duty might not be a part of this, but if Call of Duty was, what do you think about this?
I love it. I love the idea. Obviously, there are going to be people who aren't a huge fan of like the Saudi Arabia involvement and it basically being another extension of the Esports World Cup, all that yada yada. But in my head, when I first heard this, I immediately like you jumped to like all those exercises and you know, however you want to phrase it, the content people have done over the years of like trying to form these God squads for USA, Canada, et cetera, et cetera. The most interesting aspect of this though is that timing there where it says November 2026, and just using what we have for Black Ops 7 where the release is supposed to be on November 14th for this year. If we like just go a year beyond and the game after Black Ops 7 is released around that same time, what game would this tournament be played on? And I could see it going either way. It could be the final game for, it could be the final tournament for Black Ops 7, which I think would be cool. I think it would be cooler, however, if it was the first tournament for the brand new game. And I think that could be like the missing piece here to that thing we always talk about almost every year of like trying to start
Kickoff.
like the first season sooner, close to the launch of the game. Like just imagine using this year as an example. Black Ops 7 comes out on November 14th. The tournament starts Saturday, November 15th. Everybody in the world would only have like roughly 24 hours on the new game. You're playing with these teams where obviously they're, especially for some like US, Canada, UK, yada yada, like you're playing with good players, but it's not like your set CDL team, which that has been an important component of these off-season tournaments in the eyes of the CDL. Everybody's basically on this level playing field in terms of game knowledge and stuff, and you're starting the season with a big money tournament on the brand new game. Would be a good marketing opportunity. Gets the game, it highlights it, gets it out there from a competitive standpoint. I really think that would be a dream scenario for me in terms of utilizing this opportunity. Thinking about it out loud and saying all that though, that feels like that's like too easy of an answer, and that's not what would happen.
No.
But my wishful thinking would be something along that lines of making that the reality, and I would be excited if that's how it all comes together. But we'll have to wait and see. At the end of the day, if COD is involved in this esports, you know, it's kind of weird that it would the Nations Cup instead of like, you know, you think about like the World Cup in soccer and whatever. Like we have the Esports World Cup, and that's not where nations are playing. But you know, side note there. But yeah, I do think if some tournament comes to existence here with COD playing with national teams and whatnot, I'd be really excited for it.
Yeah, I would also very much welcome it. I've been a pioneer, so to speak, with the kickoff event. I've been saying this for like literally close to a decade at this point, probably, because I'm also like pro ranked play day one. Like I don't care if it looks stupid. I don't care if the rules don't make any sense. Like isn't that kind of part of the game and learning how to like it's almost like beta testing the ranked play with actual people. I think something that could happen, okay, I should rephrase that. It probably won't happen. Something that should happen is the event actually is like the weekend before the game comes out, or because the only problem with doing a tournament like the weekend of Black Ops 7 release or whatever is there are so many other people streaming the game, and there's so much other attention. People are playing the game and they're watching people play the game that they might not watch the event. They might just be watching like Nade Shot and Scump and so on and so forth. They're playing the game. But if you did the event before the game is actually even launched, you have no competition. Like, you are literally the only people allowed to stream and play the game, and that could bring eyeballs that otherwise would not be there. I could see it still being there if you decide to do it the launch weekend, which I'm currently fine. Like, I'm fine with either. I'm cool with either, because I just think that it's really stupid the way that Call of Duty has worked with competitive community. I've said this before, but there should be an event right when the game comes out, and there should be an event. I personally think that champs should be working with the reveal. So the first time that you get to see Black Ops 7 gameplay is when Black Ops 6 champs is happening. Like, you have to watch champs to kind of get this information. There should be no reason that they're not working together. They literally promote one another, and yet that has never happened before, and they never think to do it. So I don't know what why they're not doing it, but this would be a cool idea if it is the first event, or if it is if it's on the previous game. That would suck. I hope it's not that. Who knows? Call of Duty might not even be a part of it in the end. It just kind of depends. But the fact that EWC is like a sponsor of the CDL makes me think that it really could be a part of the new CDL season, which would then give us another event, and a unique one at that, because it just wouldn't be the organizations playing each other, the same 12 teams. We'd actually get some. It's almost like a 4v4 like GB tournament, like one of the old days, but it's on land for some reason. So I think there's a lot of positives that could come out of it. Obviously, there are the drawbacks of being further and further tied to the Saudi Arabian government, though, and like not even from a political thing, but you're just in general, they're so reliant on the Saudi investment fund and Esports World Cup if this goes through, because then you have two major events, one at the very beginning of the season and one at the very end of the season, and they're probably two of the biggest prize pools as well. So then, what if, for example, this is actually something that's been rumored in basketball. I don't know if you've seen this, but the Saudi Arabia or some other Middle Eastern countries are thinking about starting a professional basketball league that could rival the NBA, and that doesn't seem super feasible in pro sports because the NBA is so part of the world already. But something like the CDL certainly could be replaced by a Saudi league if they're just well, we're already running 2 of these events. We'll just run 6 of these events and we'll push out the CDL. So I think there is a little bit of concern. I don't know if Activision really cares one way or the other, because they might just be well, we don't have to pay for it. You guys pay for it. That sounds good to me. And that might be the way they're actually thinking already. But I'm just trying to say there could be caution. There might not be. But I just figured I'd say it just to cover all of our bases. Let's talk about some RosterMania stuff, though. We'll kind of fly through it because we're right about an hour into this episode. Nothing really happened with a lot of these teams. Obviously, we did talk about aBeZy. He officially left FaZe. Simp, he didn't really say much. He quote tweeted, he said, "So long, partner," the gif of Woody from Toy Story. I think that's pretty interesting, but not not a long quote, not a long statement on the matter. But one of the biggest, I think, and it could be very impactful. I'm a big fan of this guy. So are you. Kismet reportedly is being targeted as the 4th for the Vegas Falcons after Vegas reportedly struck out on getting either Sib or Ghosty as their 4th. Of course, the roster as it stands right now appears to be Celium, Pred, Exnid, and now Kismet, which is a very interesting roster. for a lot of reasons, but that would also mean that Kismet is flexing, and that is not a role that he is like, that's what is being talked about. Because it would either be Exnid or Kismet as the flex. It seems like Kismet's going to be kept on the second sub. Kismet, or Exnid, yes, Exnid's on the second sub. Kismet has been a great second sub, literally won a world championship doing it next to Hydra, won Champs MVP that year because he was so great. I don't know if it'll work out, but I think it's worth the risk for Vegas, considering there aren't very many high-level AR players that they could pull in to replace him. What do you think about this potential fit with Kismet in Vegas?
Yeah, so that's I would personally, if Kismet is going to Vegas, I would really like him to be that second sub, because I think it's again just like from a pure play style perspective, like Kismet and Pred would be kind of comparable to Kismet and Hydra, just in the sense of like Pred does not want to be near the objective at all. He just wants to be killing people. Kismet could be doing that OBJ work, going in first and letting Pred get his trade, stuff like that. So I think that dynamic would work well together if they're both on the SMG. But from a roster construction standpoint, like this just, and I'm not going to blame Xnid, but it feels like that's kind of like, if Xnid is a part of this team, that's the biggest question, is whether he's going to be the second sub or the flex.
Yeah.
And the earlier reports were that they're going after guys like Sib and Ghosty, which makes that's what I think is leading to this conversation of like Kismet's going to join to be that flex, because they were looking at AR players who could be, especially Sib, like
Sib is a flex.
A really good flex, yeah. I mean, we've seen Ghosty and Sib both be flexes to an extent, and main ARs too, so I feel like that's why that feels like a more natural role fit. So yeah, I don't know. It just feels like, Zuma was in some drama yesterday with some Apex guy, Imperial Hal, who's ironically on Falcons, and he was saying like they were like spitballing and theory crafting salaries, and like the 400,000 number came out, and Zuma was basically like, there are CDL pros who are making double and triple that just from salary right now. And he didn't name names, but if somebody's making triple 400K, which is 1.2 million, that most likely has to be Celium. And if you're willing to spend 1.2 million on Celium from a salary perspective, and then you're pairing him with a flex in Kismet, which again, we both really like Kismet as a player, we haven't seen him do it as a flex, and he just hasn't had to do that yet in his career. I think he's capable of it, and if that does happen, like, good for him. But even if those numbers that I just mentioned aren't exact or true, everything we've heard about the organization trying to spend big this season to then be in a position where they potentially are spending money on a player who is filling a role that they aren't used to doing, that is just something to keep an eye on, in my opinion, and I don't know how it's going to work out. I really like the thought of Kismet and Pred working together, but if they aren't the sub duo and Kismet is on a flex, I will be interested to see how Kismet plays in that role. But yeah, I mean, end of the day, it could be a situation, we always talk about it with some of these teams, like there's only X amount of kills on the map, and Celium and Pred are two of the best players in terms of going out there and getting kills. Like, maybe not this past season for Pred, in previous seasons where they were both all-stars, pretty sure Celium and Pred were both top 5 in KD and potentially just in kills too. So maybe they just don't need somebody in that flex role who's dropping 30 plus kills a map. If they are both going off, like, and they get Exnit and Kismet just doing the dirty work and doing what's necessary, they might have a winning recipe there. But we'll have to wait and see. I'd be very happy if Kismet was joining this team as that second sub, but from a role perspective, we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I'm not blaming Exnid, but his presence does hamstring them a little bit, because the ARs on the market are just like there's just not many of them. We talked about this in relation to Ghosty in particular, where he's like he was wanted by Toronto, Gentlemates, Vegas, potentially back to LAT. Like there were so many options for him, and it's because he is by far the best AR on the market. Like with Celium already being tied to Vegas, so like that it just makes him so wanted, and he's a great player, but it's also just there's not that many. And after Ghosty, we talked about it, like Toronto's roster could kind of go up in flames a little bit if they can't get the AR player because they have all subs right now, and now it's looking like they're not going to get Ghosty. And Vegas, I think they're in a better position though because they already have an AR player. Like it's not like they're just completely screwed without getting Ghosty. But I just thought like he would be a good fit for this roster in general, and I thought they could be like a legitimate championship contender if he joined in that fourth spot. I still think there is like considerable hope for Kismet in this spot if he is the guy, just because I think it is a little bit easier to go from main sub to flex versus main AR to flex. I just probably would trust the sub player because that's kind of like a natural progression anyway. As players get older, I'm not saying Kismet's old or anything, but like that's what we've seen before is guys that were very dominant submachine gun players, and then they move toward the AR route later in their career. We saw Kleenex, just at Esports World Cup, main sub, slide into the flex role to accommodate Abe coming in. Not saying that worked out perfectly or anything, or that's what they should be doing, but I think you just got to make do with what you have. And if you're bringing in Kismet, it's not like you're bringing in this like horrible fourth that you just kind of have to be stuck with. I think he could probably be very good in the role. It's just not the perfect fit. And there probably is no perfect fit if like, Ghosty isn't around or Optic doesn't break up and, Scrap's not on the market, so on and so forth. Like you just don't have as many options as you probably would like in this scenario. Although aBeZy would be very interesting, I would say, on Vegas. But I think FaZe might have him locked up. So we'll see what happens with Vegas. Obviously, nothing confirmed on that front as of now. Miami, we actually didn't talk about this last time we were here, but Lucky officially retired and Real was officially released. That is a more new thing, the Real part, but we talked about his situation in depth. Overall thoughts on Lucky specifically retiring?
Yeah, I think he had a interesting career in the sense of like he really kind of I guess pioneer is probably the best word I can think to associate him with in terms of like ushering in this era of the success for Spanish players in the CDL and even the CWL. From a personal standpoint for Lucky, it's probably not great to see what happened with his team. Well, like he steps down or is replaced by Super, and then the team immediately becomes a top 3, top 4 contender.
Yeah.
But as probably take a step back from the personal aspect of it, he's probably happy for the success some of those guys saw, and potentially setting them up for success in the upcoming seasons and whatnot. So shout out Lucky on his career, wishing him the best going forward. But yeah, the Miami situation with Real seemingly out of the picture there now. The question will go. We've talked about this on a couple episodes. Feels like now, will they be able to get someone like Snoopy? Are they going to retain Rencor, Super, and Metals? I think Metals is a free agent. The others we haven't heard from, but it sounds like there were some rumblings in early RosterMania, and the Miami's like, no, we're not going to get rid of our ARs. So it will be interesting to see what move Miami makes. But as I've said on a couple episodes now, they have done a really good job of identifying Spanish talent, whether it's to immediately insert them into the roster or to add them as a potential fifth player / substitute. and then bring them in mid-season when they need to. They've done a good job at that, in my opinion. So I think it's very possible there's someone not on either of our radars who Miami ends up signing, and then they are playing in the middle of next season and making an impact for Miami. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens because we've seen it the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think he's kind of a pioneer in a way. Like, he's not like one of the first Spanish players, but like obviously he's one of the first Spanish players to kind of make it in America, with the original Heretics roster in Black Ops 4. So like that's one of those things that can't actually be overlooked. Like, that's a very important moment, and like really the reason why there was even kind of any sort of clamoring for them to get involved again during the CDL, because if they never make it into the CWL, I don't know if like enough American fans really know or care about Heretics to the extent that they're like, oh, that's cool, like Heretics is back in COD. Like that, I don't think it really mattered to them if that original team didn't make it into the CWL. But so like guys like him, Journey, Methods, those guys, like, you know, they paved the way a little bit for Heretics to be where they are now. And you know, I'm sure it does sting that like they just got so much better after they replaced him, but like that just happens all the time. Like, that's just the way esports goes. And I don't think he should take it personally or anything. It's just Super is an incredible player, and like Miami got super lucky to have him. You know, no pun intended, obviously. And like, I think it also sucks for him because I'm sure he cared a lot about what, like, how Heretics does, and now to see Real leave Heretics when it seemed like they were about to get into potentially like contender status with that four, it just, you know, that's a tough pill to swallow. But best of luck to him. Like, he's a great player. Wish him the best in his future endeavors. Like, you know, I don't know what he's planning on doing. Maybe he could be a coach. I know Methods is a coach for Miami, so that's always a realistic opportunity. Surge is the next one up. Literally, like right after we did our last episode, they confirmed that they were releasing all of their players, which was incredible. That might be the best timing we've ever had on the podcast. And like you mentioned earlier, though, there have been rumors that Legend, the Halo Pro that plays for Optic, that he could be a target for this. I almost said the Seattle Surge, the Vancouver Surge. It seems though that like even those reports, like Ronnie Intel put out the initial report, and then Ronnie Intel like quote tweeted his own report and was like, I don't think that this is very likely just based on everything. So I don't know if it actually will even happen, but I think it's interesting to talk about. Space Station might be a better option than Surge, just because they have the Halo connection. They probably are decently familiar with Legend from his previous stint. And something I wrote down just so I wouldn't forget. Obviously, Formal could be an option for Call of Duty, right? He's not going to be on Optic. I think we should all know that. Like, that's not going to happen, at least right now. Yeah, right now. Maybe after the first event, maybe after the first week of the season. Who knows with Optic? But I mean, Formal, Space Station, Legend, like it could work. Like, especially for this season, if Space Station's able to make it work now, like to, hey, we're getting into the league, like let's buy Carolina, let's buy Boston, we're going to become Space Station in Salt Lake City. It could work to bring in Formal and Legend, two Halo pros. Obviously, Formal has way more experience in Call of Duty, and then bring in two other players that could fit on the roster and just see what happens. I think that would be a very fun thing to do. It would certainly gain some momentum and some popularity for them immediately, because Formal was one of the most beloved COD pros of all time. But what do you think about Legend in particular, just kind of being floated out in the COD space right now?
Yeah, I like it. We've obviously seen a lot of people over the years transition from Halo to COD and become, pretty big names in the COD scene. So if this kid's as good as Halo as everybody's hyping him up to be, that it seems like he could be next man up in terms of those Halo to COD legends.
Yep.
No pun intended there. But back to the surge and this whole situation, we kind of, I guess I wasn't really thinking about it at the time, but it's possible Surge could be like, what about Space Station taking Surge's spot? And it seems like that's like potentially more of an option than in previous years where we weren't really thinking about that, especially when, like a half hour ago, we're talking about Boston, Carolina being the only potential spots theoretically for a new team to come in. Luminosity was recently purchased or sold to some other uh, entity, and I believe I should have looked at it again and put it in the notes, but there's some discussion around this in terms of what that means for the Surge, and it's like the Surge is technically owned by the company that owned Luminosity and not actual Luminosity or something along those lines, where it's like this doesn't necessarily mean that the Surge
Yeah.
has been sold just because Luminosity has been sold, or something along those lines. Again, this is all Twitter stuff, and I don't think any of it's actually maybe the Luminosity sale was confirmed, not 100% sure, but regardless, in terms of what it means for us and the CDL and this legend stuff, it just means there's some uncertainty right now in terms of what's going on with the Surge. But the sense that they had a pretty, in you know, objectively speaking, they had a pretty good season in terms of a season where you don't actually win anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if
Yeah.
you have a season where you don't actually win a tournament, they had the next best, the next closest thing to a good season in that regard. And they just seemingly let all of their players and Rambo, their coach, leave. Like, again, it could mean nothing, and they could just be looking to lower their budget or whatnot, spend a little less on the team potentially. Like, maybe all these guys, like we've talked about in past episodes of FaZe, 04 and aBeZy, just they got some offers because of those grand finals appearances this year, and Surge is like, yeah, we're not matching that. You go ahead. So we don't know for sure, but it seems like the opening is potentially there for Surge to move on or cut budget, cut spending, if that is what they're looking to do. We don't know for sure. We're gonna have to wait and see. It is interesting that Legend, from a business standpoint, that is, if he, in theory, is a player who becomes available, he could technically be on the cheaper end because he is potentially a quote unquote risk, just in the sense of not having competitive Call of Duty experience at the highest level. Um, but there is, as like you said, Breaking Point retweeted the Ronnie thing, that Ronnie retweeted Jacob Hale, mentioning that we don't know what Legends contract status is with Optic, and if there is any sort of like buyout attached to it or whatever, we don't know. So long-winded way of saying, I think we are probably a good month plus away from hearing anything more on what Surge is actually doing.
Yeah, I was just looking up. Vertical Studios is buying Luminosity and something called Omnia from Enthusiast Gaming, which is the parent company of the Vancouver Surge and formerly Luminosity. I don't know what again. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that they're thinking about selling their Call of Duty spot or their Call of Duty League spot. I think that's just speculation at the best. There's just, I don't know, like they could be going on their way out. I don't like, obviously it's not a good thing that they just completely wiped the team this offseason, considering this was their best performance. Like, this was their best season in CDL history. Even though they had a great performance in what was it, the first Pred Sib season.
Yeah, I mean, they won a tournament in Vanguard,
Yeah,
so
I don't
you
know,
could
like
argue
when
with
you go
that.
to Champs Grand Finals and Esports
Yeah,
World Cup Grand Finals, and you go to the most Grand Finals of any team in the entire CDL, I feel like that's a great
fr-
move.
from a financial standpoint, most
Yeah,
successful for the
yeah,
players, but yeah,
yeah. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned them. Like there are three teams in the league that seem vulnerable at the very least to
point.
either being bought or leaving in general. Gentlemates, they're like I don't know, like this is probably going to be a really good roster if everything works out. Reportedly, it's Ghosty, Neptune, Sib, and Envoy. Holy mother of God, that is a really, really good roster on paper. Obviously, you get half of LAT from this past season. Neptune, who we talked about, was like the breakout player of the year, whatever you want to say. Like we thought he was an all-star, second team all-star player. Sib didn't really get the show probably like because he wasn't in a lot of big matches because C9 was so bad this year, but he's been a very highly sought after free agent, it seems, with Vegas and Gentlemates considering him. Do you think this roster as constructed is a championship contender, or are they more like in that tier two with the like Toronto and potentially FaZe? We'll see what happens with this new FaZe roster.
Yeah, I don't think if I did a power ranking, they'd be in the 1 or 2 spots for me. But I think this roster has the potential to win a championship this year. But they probably would be in like that tier below the very top teams. Again, all things considered, we don't know any of the official rosters yet. But I really like this roster, and I like it more than the roster that was reported last time when we did the show, because this report came out a day after we did the show, and the last time we did the show, the reported roster was Ghosty, Neptune, Nasty, and Envoy. So this latest report is Sib replacing Nasty, and that's where the whole, because last time we did the show, it sounded like Sib was going to go to Falcons, and now Sib to Gentlemates. That really changes the dynamic of this team, in my opinion, because last time when we were talking about this team, I brought up my whole spiel on Ghosty again. I'll try to keep it brief, but like we've seen multiple iterations of Ghosty where he's had to be the slaying superstar and he's been able to be more of a role player and step back. I thought with that previous roster with Nasty, we were going to have to see more along the lines of Ghosty taking that superstar slaying role. With Sib coming into this picture now, I think, Nasty had undoubtedly a better season than Sib last year, but I still think Sib is a better slayer than Nasty, and I think Sib can just enter that role of like just do everything with an AR, kill everything in front of you, and then Ghosty can focus more on being the IGL, which is a term people don't really like, but I still think Ghosty's communication is one of his best assets, and I think you have some, especially based on performances last year. Neptune's a really good slaying SMG. Historically, Sib has been a really strong slaying AR. You have Envoy to do dirty work. Ghosty can be a really good slayer. With this lineup, he might not necessarily have to and can focus more on the communication. Like, I really like the makeup of this team, and I would be shocked if this team was really bad. Something would have to go down behind the scenes that we're just not predicting in order for this team to not see success. Again, not saying they're going to win every tournament or anything like that, but I would be shocked if this team wasn't consistently pushing for a championship Sunday spot at almost every tournament.
We're about an hour and a half in. There was the Carolina stuff of like, will they sell their spot? Won't they? Yeah. We've kind of discovered that. Scump said there will be no change to Optic. I don't know. I think that might be the most shocking thing we've heard. Really, the only other stuff would be the retirements. So, like, I don't know if we did we talk about Major Maniac retiring? I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
Well, real quickly, like obviously, like a very underrated player. Part of very like kind of forgotten that he was a part of the original Atlanta FaZe roster, but like went to the Champs Grand Finals that year. He was part of that great Gen G team in Black Ops 4 before the CDL. Even though they had like a really up and down end of the season that year.
They were like a Vancouver Surge. They kept getting second.
And he was a great player. I think I've interviewed him before. Super nice guy. obviously like the end of the career didn't really work out. I think he made like not even a tactical error, but like he took a risk by joining Boston last season, and we even talked about that. Like if you want to be in the CDL, you take that risk. But if you want to like be in the CDL at a later point, maybe you don't make that risk. And he took the risk, and it didn't pay off because Boston sucked, and that wasn't any of his fault, obviously. So yeah, that's something that's happened. Hicksy retired, so we've had a few things happen. But one unretirement that we have not talked about is our Yoda King. iLLeY is back. That was one of the shorter retirements right after Paul X, and I'm not shocked. It seemed very sudden. We gave him like the eulogy basically when he retired the first time. I have no idea what the future of iLLeY is. We both love him. We both like he's so much fun. Like I wish that he was in the CDL. I don't ever see him really getting back there. Like at least at 12 teams. Like it just seems really hard to think that that's going to happen. So what do you think about iLLeY unretiring?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing that comes to mind for me personally would be like that potential Team Canada opening if there is this, Nations Cup or whatever, like even if it's just for a coaching role or something like that, like feels like iLLeY would be an immediate top candidate to be involved for any sort of Team Canada operations or whatnot. But from a playing perspective, we could enter a phase of this RosterMania where some of these teams that we haven't heard much from are willing to take a risk on iLLeY. It's also maybe to the point where some of these orgs are just like with all of the, I don't think controversy is necessarily the right word, but everything that's happened over the last couple of years with iLLeY and his absence from the CDL, maybe that pushes teams in the opposite direction and puts them in a position where they don't want to pursue having iLLeY on their team. But end of the day, he's still really good player, really good S&D mind. If nothing else, he could be an asset to any of these teams as an S&D coach or just a coach in general. So yeah, I think most likely we see iLLeY in the pit to start this upcoming year, unless one of these other teams that we haven't heard anything from wants to take a big swing and a big risk. I don't necessarily see it happening, but like pairing Legend with iLLeY wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, just in the sense of like somebody to learn pure game knowledge from, and specifically S&D, because if you think of like, I don't know if it's actually in Halo Esports yet, but there was that like S&D mode that they were trying or whatever. I don't know if that actually has happened in the latest game. But let's just pretend it hasn't yet. Like it's very possible that Legend would be able to come over to COD, and they got like their Team Slayer and stuff in Halo, and like he's probably fine shooting his gun, but maybe he just doesn't have that S&D background or knowledge. Who else is there better available right now to learn S&D from than somebody like iLLeY? So maybe that's something, maybe that's a potential opening. I don't see that actually happening, but it is something to think about and something that could in theory happen. And so right now for me, iLLeY probably in challengers to start this upcoming year, maybe gets an opportunity. But when we get around to that, Nations Cup or whatever, I would be very shocked if there's some form of a Team Canada that doesn't have iLLeY involved, whether it's as a player or a coach.
Yeah, he's just a really weird case because he makes a lot of sense for some teams, especially ones like I think it was Gentlemates this past season where they were not very good in S&D, and I think I just said like maybe iLLeY could come in and like just help them in that regard, even if he's not like a major help in hardpoint or control. but that's just not something that teams are really thinking about. And like there are only 12 teams. There aren't many teams in general that are taking risk on like current challengers players. Like a lot of them like to recycle CDL players that are currently in the CDL. So he's kind of on the outs in that regard. Um, Coaching probably is the best way for him to go, but I don't know if he even wants to do
Yeah,
that. Like I think that might
yeah.
be the biggest roadblock is like he just wants to play, and I don't see him getting back to the CDL, at least other than like maybe an end of the season spot where it's just kind of like the season's over basically for that team and they bring him in. That's really what I think.
I'm trying to look. I guess this is a decent way to wrap it up. I thought I saw Major Maniac. Maybe he said it in his video. I didn't watch his retirement video is 24 minutes. I thought I saw a tweet where him mentioned like wanting to move into coaching, and I think he did. Oh yeah, August 5th, looking to become a full-time coach within the CDL for next season while continuing to pursue my degree in project management. Um, I think Major Maniac would be a great coach. Just again, based on everything we saw from him throughout his career and whatnot, he's one of those players that he's more known for his mind as a player than the stats he dropped on the scoreboard. And I think that would translate well to a coaching staff. So that would be interesting to see. I of the two that we're talking about here, I do think Major Maniac would probably have a much easier time transitioning to coaching. But I do think Illy, if he ever decided to do that, he could, especially for S&D in particular. I think he'd be a really good S&D coach. But Major Maniac, I think, is an interesting overall coaching opportunity, maybe for one of these other teams that's, uh, you know, starting from scratch here.
Yeah, get Rambo Ray as the head coach, Ilya as an assistant coach. Like you're really cooking at that point. And I mean, Rambo knows him really well, I would imagine. So like, it would kind of fit. Um, he could even do that while he's in challengers. I don't think like that's too crazy of an idea. Um, like it's just kind of a backup plan. I don't know if he's ever going to be interested in that, but hoping the best for him, and we'll see what happens. Same with Major Maniac too. Like I mean, he could be a FaZe assistant if he really wanted to do that because he played it for replays or not replays. He's always going to be replays to me, but Crowder.
I'm with you. Don't worry.
But yeah, that about does it. About an hour and a half in. I'm sure the next time we go live, there will be some kind of RosterMania that we can talk about, official or unofficial. Maybe we'll have an organization change. We've been talking a lot about that, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen quickly. But who knows with how the CDL works out. But please like, subscribe, or follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube. We're on all of the platforms. Please subscribe to the YouTube. Please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can follow both of us on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks and at Preston Byers. And the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. And not sure when the next show will be. It's really all depending on what happens in RosterMania or what news kind of pops up. I think we covered like almost everything that we didn't cover on the last episode. Like we have a few other things that are like very small in comparison. So like if we need to, we'll talk about those. But other than that, I think we did cover quite a bit, at least from the last time that we did the show. So my voice, if we don't do these podcasts regularly, my voice starts to go out toward the end of the podcast every single time now. So it is going out. I will stop talking. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Long episode today, so let's just get out of here. Thank you guys, as always, for the support. Shout out Trimmy in the Twitch chat. Shout out Eli Sutless and Prevail in the YouTube chat showing love. Yeah, like Preston said, schedule's a little wonky right now, but aBeZy officially got dropped yesterday. We were able to do a show less than 24 hours or roughly 24 hours after that news officially dropped. So that's probably the time frame we're looking at. If anything major gets confirmed, we can potentially do a show somewhat close to when that news officially drops. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, you'll see us whenever you see us on the feed, and the best way to know is to subscribe to the YouTube and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date on when we'll be going live next. So until then, hope everyone has a good one. Stay safe and remember to send the chow.